Indy Pace Car Supra. For the 1995 season, Toyota donated Toyota Supras to IndyCar as pace cars. They were prepped in combination with Whelen and PPG. So these are well known as the PPG Indy pace cars.
There's our Toyota pace car. By the way, the pace lap, we didn't get a chance to mention, it was driven by football great Walter Payton. Now we're back actually to the regular pace car drivers in the series who are professional drivers. So that's
They produced 5 of these cars. Toyota USA does have one as well in their museum. That car is an automatic. This car is a 6-speed manual turbo. Larry Chen did a fantastic video on this car with me at Grid Life Lime Rock 2 years ago. Sean will put a link in the description or a link right here to Larry's video. Feel free to check that out. The thing that I didn't cover in that video, and the thing that we never talked about, was that of the 5, we have 2 of them here. This is the one we're not afraid to modify, the bastard child. This car has a very interesting and rich history. After being a pace car, the car was recalled by Toyota and turned into a Pikes Peak hill climb car. It was driven by a Japanese driver who then crashed it. It was rolled. It had the roof replaced, had the cage replaced. I think that was one of maybe 4 cages or 5 cages that have been in this car over its entire lifetime. So being that this car had such a sordid past, we were not afraid to modify it. This car has had many motors in it as well, from relatively stock to a 1,200 horsepower drag car setup to now its current form. So we were not afraid to go through, change the aesthetic appearance, add carbon fiber, add a small, a little bit of JDM flavor in terms of aero. And today we're gonna finally walk through it. This car is owned by Peter, same guy who owns the Turbo Miata that we did a video on. To preface the use case for this car, this is supposed to be a track day weapon. This is not a street-driven car. It will never have a license plate on it, although it does have a VIN, and it could. It's not a street-driven car. So he wanted something that would be fun, that has historic significance, that he could take to the track, and use it with a moderate amount of power to enjoy sort of the best version of a road course-driven Supra that he could do. So first of all, we started out with a Ridox front end, front bumper, and full splitter combo. The likelihood that this will be turned to smithereens is pretty good. So we actually ended up going with a reproduction of that so that we're not turning a $7,000 bumper into smithereens. And it actually fits very well. This is a Shine Auto product, and we won't be afraid to bash it off curbs and destroy it. Keep in mind, this is not a show car. It may look pretty clean right now, but it is absolutely a track weapon to be used as such, not to sit inside of a bubble and be shined on for the next 25 years. This car is made to be used hard, fixed, refixed, rebuilt, done again, and beat up. So, in combination with the Ridox front bumper, we went with a Ridox style hood. This is actually produced by Saibon. Again, we didn't really want to be putting authentic parts on the car to just be blown to bits. It doesn't really make financial sense. As well as the TRD GT3000 wing. This is a super common wing. Everybody runs these on their cars. It's probably the most recognizable wing for MK4 Supra aside from the OEM, but it helps a lot. It's not a gigantic GT wing. Again, we just wanted something simple. This is also a carbon fiber hatch. It's color matched. but it is a carbon fiber hatch. The interior is really, really nice, actually. Somebody, years back, this was before we got our hands on it, somebody went through and did all custom aluminum tin work on the inside. Did a fantastic job. This is all hand rolled and brushed. Really, really cool, really nice. Inside, you'll see the car is caged, pretty minimal interior. Original dash has been cut to have the cage pass through, minimized, obviously no radio or anything like that. It is a factory Getrag V160 6-speed H-pattern gearbox. Car's on a Haltech Elite 2500. Peter wanted to keep OEM gauges instead of doing like a digital screen, so we've got most of our CAN data coming in by way of the Haltech CAN gauge display. We have a rotary trim knob for more or less horsepower from center. And a very simple Carling rocker switch panel. The car has a fire system. Other than that, very minimal. Really nothing to report. Does also have a fuel cell. So this is a speed fill fuel cell from ATL. Standard motorsport, 20-gallon deal. Car's got two Bosch 044 fuel pumps. The other thing that you'll notice is these are kind of interesting. So this is not a standard style top hat. This car has double eyelet Olin's motorsport dampers from back in the early 2000s, custom retrofitted, pretty cool setup. It also still has the original Whelen pace car lights that do still function. So these are the igniters, strobe power supplies for the original pace car lights. Pretty interesting stuff. Now we'll get into the motor. JZ. Yeah, we're back, baby, with another 2JZ. Here we go. So the car originally arrived for a tune. Just needs a tune. It had been sitting for some time. A shop previously put a drag race setup in the car, and it was a mess, to say the least. So it was on a twin GTX 3076R turbo kit, and the car was super, super laggy. Peter tried to drive it on the road course, and he's like, it's terrible, it's laggy, and then it wants to kill you. It doesn't feel linear. I don't like it. He parked it for almost 10 years. So he dug it out of retirement and brought it over here and said, can you make this fun? Make this nice to drive. I just want it to work. So he raced these cars back in World Challenge or Speed GT, back before it was called World Challenge. And he really liked the way that the car drove back then. He just wanted more power. So instead of being the 340 or 350 horsepower that they had back then, he was like, I want like a 500 or 600 horsepower situation so that it's fun, but it's not trying to kill me. So we ended up starting with a 2J that was in the car. It was cammed, it was this, it was that. As we started digging in, we realized that the entire thing was smoked. I didn't think that many miles were put on it or that much time had been put on it, but everything was beat up. The valve seats were beat up, the valves were beat up, the wrist pins were beat up, the pistons were beat up, the cylinder walls were beat up, the main and rod bearings, the mains were decent, but the rods were whooped. So somebody had been doing some serious beatings on it, or maybe it was put together with used parts. I don't really know. Either way, that was 10 years ago. When we got it, it was clean it up, make it work. It ticked like crazy. The lash was completely wrong, probably because the valves and valve seats were beat up. So we went all through it, started tearing it down, analyzed it, realized that absolutely everything was trash, and we decided to just start with a brand new, from Toyota, 2J. You can still buy these from Toyota. We ended up getting a brand new OEM Toyota cylinder head that comes as an empty core. So we started with a brand new cylinder head for that reason. The block is a brand new OEM Toyota loaded short block. That's block, crank, rods, pistons, everything assembled, ready to go. So for the power level that we needed, a stock short block is perfectly fine. We're targeting 600-ish horsepower. Basically, whatever the max a now single GTX 3076R can do. So I said, hey, since you have 2 of those turbos, and you're probably gonna need a spare, why don't we just take one and put a single GTX 3076R on here, and now you've got a backup. So we took the twin turbo manifold off, we took one of his turbos, and put it on here. Now they did have 0.64 AR housings, so I switched it to a Tile V-band 82 AR hot side because we've now switched to an R-Tech V-band manifold. So R-Tech, fantastic. Ben makes these in cast as well as a plethora of other manifolds and things. Products are fantastic. They're strong as hell. They're light as hell. They fit fantastic. Single 30R, Motorsport Hypergate. So this is a Turbo Smart 45mm Hypergate, but it is the Motorsport version that has a heat sink between the diaphragm and the housing so that air flowing over the bay can actually try to cool down this diaphragm a little bit because it is, right on top in the heat source. So try to put our best foot forward on that and get the Motorsport version. The motor is still on OEM coil packs. Again, we're only targeting 600 horsepower, so OEM coil packs do the job just fine. The front cover, water housing, intake manifold, upper and lower, as well as the throttle body were all broken down and vapor honed. Even though this car only has like 9,000 original miles on it, or 10,000 original miles on it, it has been sitting for a long time, and aluminum just corrodes. You get that natural layer of aluminum oxide. So we got it all in the vapor hone, blasted it up. It looks fantastic, nice and shiny, nice and new, like OEM. Fuel system, fuel rail, fuel pulsation damper, on rail, rail mounted regulator, direct mount, all radium. Love their stuff, goes on everything, rinse, repeat. We absolutely love their stuff. If you're gonna buy fuel system stuff and they make it for your car, just buy it. I'm not sponsored, although I'd like to be. Injectors, Injector Dynamics ID1050X, DS probably, the newest ones. They're great. We use them on everything, we love them. Wiring harness actually for this car is Wiring Specialties. So I reached out to Brian at Wiring Specialties and I said, hey, this is what we're looking to do. It's a race car doing race car things. So we want a motorsport version of a Mark IV plug and play harness, which oddly enough, they don't sell a lot of. He's like, oh, we do a lot of 2Js and like S chassis and this and that. But he's like, I mean, they had built it before, but it's just, I guess not very common that guys call with a Mark IV with a 2J in it. But anyway, so we got a full plug and play harness from them. Everything worked as intended right off the rip. So highly dependable, I like that. We've gone to a Haltech intake air temp sensor directly in the manifold. These are great because they are able to work with pressurized systems. So you don't have to worry about any issues with that. This actually is on an AEM map sensor because it was convenient and it was already mounted there. So we got our dry carbon coil plug cover from N1 Composites. These guys are out of United Arab Emirates. And these are super thin, super light, pretty affordable, showed up quick. Then we matched it with the satin finish carbon intake elbow, which we usually do, like any sort of forward-facing 2J car. It's just a great way, you can get it done in a single bend, and we really like the carbon tube. I have the same thing on my IS300 Sport Cross. Catch can, Freed Engineering. I really like their placement of the catch can. It's nice and clean and out of the way. It all bolts in like factory. We were able to bolt it in there because we deleted ABS as well. So Freed Engineering, nice little catch tank over there. They also make this little coolant overflow, which we liked a lot. So in lieu of, making these items ourselves, which we're fully capable of doing, I'm like, you know what, somebody makes something cool. They already put in the time. They already designed it. It fits very well and it's, just works. So I'll, even though we can make all this stuff, I just buy it from guys who already make it, if they make it. So good job, guys. Fluid systems. So because we got rid of the ABS module and we got rid of the traction control module, on these cars, they are just filled to the brim with stuff on both sides. And I'm just like, get it out of there. We don't need it. So we went with the Chase Bays ABS Delete kit that also has the bias control knob integrated here. So if we need to change rear bias, we can just by turning this here knobby. It's great. Brand new brake master cylinder, brand new clutch master cylinder, and refurbed the brake booster. Just clean it up, make it look nice. The power steering reservoir is Chase Bays. We actually hard mounted this to the strut tower because it's kind of a convenient location and it's not going to move. And these are great. When you fill them to the correct height, they do not overflow. So I know people have had, difficulties with these in the past or whatever, it overflows or whatever. But when you fill them to the appropriate height, they're good. The chase bay's inlet as well. So that's a DAT 12 inlet. Just cleans it up nice. And then this is the chase bay's high pressure line as well that goes down to the rack. For coolers, we have a power steering cooler up here on top. That's actually a chase bay, is the smallest chase bay's cooler that they make. We actually ran that horizontally because there is ambient pressurized air that comes out of there when you're moving forward. So the cooler works perfectly fine, even at that horizontal angle. So we're like, awesome. Oil cooler is also chase bays. So with the oil cooler, interestingly enough, there's really no one that makes a dedicated oil cooler for a Mark IV Supra. And by dedicated, I mean there's no mounting provisions specifically for a Mark IV Supra. There's no ducting specifically for the Mark IV Supra. So when we did it, we ended up making our own mounting and ducting setup that works with the Ridox bumper. So I don't know if you can see in there. So that is all ducted into the bumper, and that exits out through the fender liner, and then there's like stainless steel mesh. Very similar to like how you would see on a GT3 Cup car, like a Porsche GT3 Cup car. There are no companies that make dedicated brake ducts for these cars. So we ended up fabbing these up. Evan actually built these, and these run into 2.5-inch ducting tubes that then go to backing plates behind the rotor. On an old Brembo GT kit, that actually has a pretty large hat, and the ducting goes in and fills the space inside the hat, and then that cool air exits through the vanes in the rotor as the rotor rotates. Intercooler is, I don't know. So I think the intercooler is like an old Titan Motorsports intercooler from forever ago. But it's a big boy. It's like a 4-inch core. I think, like I said, it's an old Titan Motorsports core. This car originally had like this gigantic plenum, a really old like cast Titan Motorsports intake manifold. It was awful. It was like 120 millimeter throttle body. It was terrible. It was just that old way of doing 2J things. You can make 1,000 horsepower on a stock intake manifold. I don't know why people decide to do anything else. I mean, unless they're trying to make big power drag racy cars, I guess, but transient response, stock throttle body, and a stock intake manifold, you cannot beat it up to 800, 900, 1,000 horsepower. They're sick. So that's why we went back to the stock intake manifold and vapor honed it, made it look all nice and clean. The other thing is too, the radium swivel catch can fittings, love that. Unfortunately, somebody had Harry homeowner tapped some NPT into this one over here, and this valve cover is discontinued. So we ended up having to roll with it on that side. But yeah, this side's got the radium swivel, that's cool. Downpipe, 3.5-inch to 4-inch HKS Super Hyper Dragger. I don't know, it's a 4-inch deal. 3.5-inch to 4-inch exhaust. And then the wastegate is rerouted into the downpipe. Peter is mature and he does not like external dumps. Quite frankly, I don't like external dumps anymore either. I'm kind of over it. I just like to hear the engine noise, sort of that strung out on the power exhaust note instead of just the exhaust leak sound. I'm just not into it. I know the kids like that stuff. I don't really like that stuff. But anyway, so we rerouted it. And then in terms of routing and pipes, the intercooler plumbing is very short route. So we ended up welding 90 outlets to the intercooler, and that short routes through the pipings over here, as well as the cold side pipe is kind of as short as you can go. A lot of guys like to send it out here, as you can see at some point in its sorted past. Someone decided that would be a really cool idea to, I don't know, maybe they use their teeth to cut this hole or whatever, but they thought it would be a really cool idea to cut a hole here and send the intercooler plumbing that way. Not very cool. So we ended up rebuilding it and going in and around. So let's talk horsepower. Let's talk turkey. This car on pump gas, it was at 1 bar, so 14.7 pounds, 14.3 pounds. It made 420. So it was 420 horsepower, 420 foot-pounds of torque. That is pump gas, 1 bar of boost. At 1.5 bar, I think it made like 505, and then we haven't switched to E85 yet. So I still need to finish the tuning on E85. But again, it's gonna be roughly 28 to 30 to 32 pounds of boost, kind of whatever that turbo will put out on ethanol, probably in the 610, 620 horsepower range. So plenty. A lot of people ask, oh, does that make 1,000 horsepower? The best way to ruin a Supra is make 1,000 horsepower. And if you talk to anybody who has 1,000 horsepower Supra that's not a complete sicko, they also don't like 1,000 horsepower Supras. They're broken constantly. So 600 wheel horsepower, great way to enjoy these cars, not too much. You know, we don't like to overpower cars. That's not our thing. We like to make balance because, again, this is not a roll racing, street racy guy car. This is not a drag racer guy car. This is road course, constant duty. This thing needs to work at that power level for 45 minutes to an hour at a time, flat out. So, again, you have to choose a reasonable amount of horsepower in order to make the thing last. 600 wheel does the job. So I think I've pretty much covered most of what I can remember. Sure, I've left out a few details. Hopefully there's pictures and things. We've had this car for almost 2 years, probably going on 3 years. It was a 18-month to 2-year project between pulling the motor, getting the bay painted. Normally these cars did not have a yellow engine bay. They all started life as white cars. We wanted it to be color matched. It was time. It was time to finally go through. The car was really rough when it came here. So it was time to just finally go through and give it the attention that it deserves and try to make some sort of cohesive thing that's nice to look at and does justice to its historic significance. So although yes, we have modified it and it's not original and it is only, you know, 1 of 5, we have another one right here. So the other interesting thing about these cars, you know, and we didn't really touch on that, and I'll just very quickly go back on that. They only built 5 of these cars. So there were 2 manual turbos. You're looking at them. There was a non-turbo manual, like a base model. That car ended up in Georgia somewhere. And there were 2 turbo automatics. And I believe Adam Carolla has one, and Toyota USA has one in California at their historic museum thing. So as far as 6-speed manual turbo hardtops, pace cars, Indy pace cars, these are it, the 2 of them. And again, because we have one that is absolutely as it was when it rolled off the track from its pace car duty, that's the bubble car. This is the Shred City car, okay? So I'm sure that it's gonna make people upset, but it just is what it is. This car was rough. It was beat. It had been rolled off Pikes Peak. It had been crashed many times and fixed and crashed and fixed and crashed. There was very few original bits left on it, you know, aside from just the basic tub. So it's been given a new life again. This is probably the 5th time it's been given a new life. And this was our vision for the car. Something that is reasonable amount of horsepower, reliable, very quick spool, very good transient response, able to be used on track and beat relentlessly and keep working. We don't need to be blowing up motors and ruining $10,000 now used transmissions. V160, you know, they start at 10 grand used. So there you have it. The bastard child, 1 of 5, Indy Pace Car Supra. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye-bye.